Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very next Lunch and Learn with the United Synagogue. Thank you to Hannah from the US for inviting me. Thank you to all of you who are watching. Hope you're enjoying your lunch. Please do eat along and follow along with me as we explore some of this week's portion together. If you do have any questions, you have any comments to make, please feel free to do so in the comments box on YouTube or in the comments box on Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your comments, and I hope to be able to answer those questions as well if you do so, wish to do so. So without further ado, let me just begin with talking a bit about this week's portion. We're in the book of Exodus. Exodus is the story of the Jewish people, being redeemed from the slavery in Egypt, up until them receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai, which happens in this week's portion. So we're not so much going to discuss the Ten Commandments, which pretty much is the climax of the Jewish people leaving Egypt. But I want to talk about a very important person that features right at the beginning of this week's portion, and indeed who this portion is named after. So far in the story, we've heard and we've read about the affliction and the persecution and the slavery of the Jewish people in Egypt. We've seen the plagues, the splitting of the sea, and the Jewish people are now in the desert. And as we still do, they complained. They complained not once, but numerous times to Moses. And at this stage, they're in the desert with the manna and the water, protected by the cloud, pretty much living the life. The Torah makes it clear that the world at large knew and heard what had happened in Egypt. This is pretty much front page news. Everyone in the world would have heard about 2 million slaves, a nation of 2 million slaves escaping from Egypt, the most powerful country in the ancient world. Not only that, but through what could only have been an act of God, the entire country of Egypt is completely brought to its knees. So this isn't just something which no one would have known about. This is something which the entire world would have been very, very aware of. You have these slaves, a slave nation, who have been persecuted and living under the most terrible of conditions for over 200 years in Egypt, which, as I said, was the most powerful country at the time. And somehow, through what a supernatural, incredible events, they all managed to leave. So everyone would have known about this. And indeed, in last week's portion, in the Shira, and the song which Moses composed with the Jewish people sang as well, it says very clearly, Shamu Amim, the nations heard, Yirgazun, and they trembled. Chil Achaz, Yoshve Palashes, terror reigned. The dwellers of Palashes, people were very aware of what was going on. However, there were three very different reactions that the world had to what had happened. For the most part, the world at large was unchanged. We don't see really that it made a massive impact on people at all. So people would have heard what was going on. People would have been aware that somehow the Jews were able to escape, but they just carried on with their lives as normal. Nothing seemed to have changed despite the incredible events that had happened. There is a nation who took the opposite approach, and they decided, well, we don't like these people. We're going to go on in a murderous rage. We're going to go and attack these people. And that was the nation of Amalek, which we heard about in last week's portion. Amalek come and attack the Jewish people in an incredibly brazen act, knowing that these people had, just experienced all these miracles in Egypt and the splitting of the sea. So for Amalek to make the choice to do that just shows how evil Amalek must have been. Well, those are two reactions that people had. Number one, the reaction of pretty much everyone in the world, and number two, the reaction of Amalek, who decided to go and attack the Jewish people. But then we're told about a third reaction in this week's portion, and we are introduced to a man called Yitro. We are introduced to a man called Jethro. Now, Jethro, we sort of know about already. and he is Moses' father-in-law. When Moses ran away from Pharaoh in Egypt after getting involved with an Egyptian and having to flee for his life, he ends up in the land of Midian, and he marries Jethro's daughter Tzipporah. So we've sort of heard about Jethro already, but this time Jethro reappears, and Jethro has come to join the Jewish people. The portion begins with Vayishma Yitro, and Yitro heard Kohen Midian, the priest of Midian, Choten Moshe, the father-in-law of Moses, Et Kol Asher Asa Elohim LeMoshe, all that which God had done for Moses and for the Jewish people, because God had taken the Jewish people out of Egypt. So Jethro hears, and Jethro has a very different reaction to everyone else in the world. He didn't just carry on and remain neutral. He didn't go and fight the Jewish people, but Jethro makes the decision to come and see for himself what is going on. He was affected by what he had seen. He heard all that had happened and realized that he couldn't possibly just carry on his life as normal. He needs to make changes in his life. If there is such a clear and obvious acts of God going on in the world, then surely that's a wake-up call for him. That's going to really impress upon him that perhaps there's a truth out there which he's unaware of. The verse also makes it very clear, as just mentioned, that he was Kohen Midian. He was the priest of Midian. I guess in modern day terms, he was the archbishop of Midian. This Jethro wasn't just any guy. He was a really important man in the land of Midian. So it makes it even more remarkable that he would have left what he was doing over there to join these people. You see the incredible sacrifice that he went through to do that. Now, I should mention before we continue that there is a debate in the Talmud. There's a debate between the rabbis as to when exactly Jethro turned up, because what's interesting is that you see later on in the story, Jethro starts telling Moses, as every good father-in-law does, how he should manage the people. Jethro sees that Moses is taking on way too much. Jethro realizes that it's not good for Moses to be taking on too much. It's going to take a toll on him. There's no way that one man can possibly be in control and manage 2 million people, especially if they're Jews. And Jethro recognized that he's going to have to do something else, and he basically advises Moses, you can't judge the Jewish people alone. You can't judge the Jewish people alone. Important words. You need a system whereby people can go to the lower courts, and if the lower courts can't decide, then they go to the higher courts, and if the higher courts can't decide, then they go to the Supreme Court. And Moses was basically the Supreme Court. So Moses wouldn't judge every single case, but Moses would judge the cases that were too difficult for everyone else to judge. Now, what's interesting is that after that is where we talk about the Jewish people. The Torah talks about the Jewish people receiving the Ten Commandments and the Jewish people receiving the Torah from Mount Sinai. So what's interesting is, what was Moses judging exactly? If the Jewish people hadn't received the Torah yet, if the Jewish people didn't have this book of laws and this book of rules, then what exactly was Moses judging? Which probably is one of the reasons why the rabbis would have suggested that Jethro didn't turn up before the giving of the Torah. Jethro returned up after the receiving of the Torah. It's important to note, because this might come up a bit later on as we go through this discussion. So Jethro's turned up, and Jethro has heard what's gone on in for the Jewish people and what's gone on in Egypt, and he comes to join. The Torah doesn't tell us exactly that he's joining and converting to the Jewish people, but it says he comes to join. He comes to sort of see for himself what's going on. Now, interestingly, the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud in Zvachim 116a, asks the following interesting question. What was it, and I quote, what was it that he heard? Ma shmua shama uba. What was it that he heard that made him come, v'nitgayer, and convert to Judaism? What was it that Jethro heard that made him come and convert to Judaism? That's a very interesting question. At first glance, it seems like it doesn't really make any sense, because if you look at the verse itself, you look at the very first verse in Yitro, the very first verse in Jethro, it says very clearly, black on white, Vayishma Yitro Kohen Midian, and Jethro heard, the priest of Midian, everything that had happened to the Jewish people and to Moses, that the Jewish people had left Egypt. So the verse pretty much spells out, black on white, what it was that Jethro heard. So what are the rabbis what does the Talmud mean when it asks the question, what did Jethro hear that made him come and convert? Surely the verse itself tells us already. I think really what's going on over here is that, yes, of course, Jethro heard everything that had happened to the Jewish people. Yes, of course, he'd seen the Jewish people that left Egypt. The verse tells that to us, and we know that already. But what the Talmud is asking is, okay, fine. So he recognizes all the miracles that have happened. But what was it that prompted him to come and convert and become Jewish? What was it that made him come and join the Jewish people? He didn't have to make that choice. He didn't have to take that step. He could have very easily remained where he was in Midian and, perhaps recognized the truth of God, but not necessarily needed to come and join the Jewish people in the way he did. So the Talmud's really asking is, yes, he heard everything that happened in Egypt. Yes, he'd heard about the fact that Jewish people had left Egypt and the sea had split potentially. But what was it? What was it that made him come and convert to the Jewish faith? What was it that really pushed him to make that choice? A huge choice. Again, a huge, huge choice, because he's the Archbishop of Midian. This guy is extremely powerful and respected where he is. So the fact that he would have made this choice means that there's some serious conviction that he has about the fact that he needs to come and join the Jewish people. So as with more often than not, when it comes to the Talmud, there isn't one answer to this question. There is a debate. There are three answers suggested by the different Tanaim, the different rabbis in the Talmud, as to why Jethro would have come. What was it that he heard that made him come and join the Jewish people? So the very first one is Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua says it was the battle with Amalek. What was it that made Jethro come and join the Jewish people? It was the battle that the Jewish people had with Amalek, the very last thing that we were told about in last week's portion. Okay, an interesting suggestion. Still not so simple to understand why that would have been the reason why he would have joined. I would have guessed that that's probably the reason why he wouldn't want to join if he sees the Jewish people being attacked by everyone. But okay, that's the suggestion by Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Lazar Hamodai says it was the giving of the Torah. Jethro had heard about the fact that these Jewish people had received this book of wisdom from God, and Jethro thought to himself, if this is a people that have such truth and such wisdom from God himself, then I want to be part of that. And therefore Jethro made the decision to join. By the way, this is why I mentioned earlier that there are some opinions that hold that Jethro came after the giving of the Torah, not beforehand. And this clearly, according to Rabbi Lazar Hamodai, is the case. Rabbi Lazar Hamodai clearly is of the opinion that Jethro came after the receiving of the Torah. So we have number one, the battle with Amalek. Number two, we have the giving of the Torah, the fact that the Jewish people received the Torah. That is why he joined the Jewish people. The third suggestion given in the Talmud, this time it's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says it was the splitting of the sea. So we have three suggestions given in the Talmud. Number one, the battle with Amalek. Number two, the giving of the Torah. And number three, the splitting of the sea. Now I was thinking about this and wondering to myself, to me, I don't see these as three potential solutions to why Jethro would have come and joined the Jewish people. I think there is a profound conversation going on over here between the rabbis as to what prompted Jethro to convert. And I wanted to maybe share with you the way I sort of see what they potentially are saying about these reasons why Jethro joined, especially the first reason of the battle of Amalek. How on earth could that possibly be a reason why Jethro would have joined? Surely that would be a reason why Jethro would not want to join. So I really see these three suggestions as the three proofs or three strong pieces of evidence for the godliness of the Jewish people, for the truth of the Jewish people. And what they're suggesting are three things which really show to the world, or show to us as well, how supernatural we are. How, explaining us in any other way just wouldn't possibly make any sense. And the very first one is the Battle of Amalek. And what I'm going to call that very first one is anti-Semitism. If we look at anti-Semitism, and we look at how it's been so consistent throughout the ages, and how it's been so brutal and violent throughout the ages, something which no other people in the world has experienced the way that we have. The consistency, every single country, almost every single country that we've been in has hated us and persecuted us and treated us in the most terrible of ways. Well, that's supernatural. That just doesn't make any sense from just a rational perspective. Why on earth would the Jewish people, out of all the other nations in the world, be so downtrodden? What on earth is going on? And Jethro would have been thinking about this too. Jethro would have been thinking to himself, why are Amalek attacking these people? What did these people do wrong? Why are these people being subjected to the most violent of treatments? And what Jethro recognized is, well, if this is a people that is supernaturally hated, if this is a people which other nations in the world just have an irrational hatred for, then there's got to be something about them which I need to check out for myself. There's got to be something about this people which is different to everyone else. And that was the first reason why Jethro made the decision to join. The anti-Semitism was, in a way, didn't push him away from Judaism, but it made him recognize that there's something which is he needs to see for himself. It just doesn't make any sense. And indeed he came and joined. That's the very first suggestion. The second suggestion, Rebbe Lazar Hamodai, who says that it was the giving of the Torah. Well, that one is sort of a bit easier to understand. That's another element of who we are as a people, probably the most important element of who we are as a people, that really shows our relationship with God, that really shows the truth of who we are. We have this book of wisdom. The Torah is not just a book of rules and regulations. The Torah is the book of wisdom behind life. And the fact that Jethro recognized that this people are a wise nation, this people are a nation that have received a book of truth from God himself, well, this surely is the people that I need to join. This surely is a people that I want to have something to do with. So we have, number one, the anti-Semitism. Number two, the Torah itself, the wisdom of the Torah. And number three, Rabbi Eliezer says it was the splitting of the sea, the Kriyat Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea. Well, I see this one as the supernatural existence of the Jewish people. The very fact that we, the Jewish people, still exist is nothing short of miraculous. The very fact that we are still around, despite all the persecutions, despite the genocide that we've been through, despite every single nation in the world hating us at some point or another, well, that too shows there's something supernatural about us. That too shows there's something which is just miraculous and godly. The fact that we are still around, the fact that we are still existent. And today I was just looking into some quotes about this before this lunch, and I found a few which really speak to what I'm saying over here. Over 300 years ago, King Louis XIV of France asked Pascal, the great French philosopher, to give him proof of the supernatural. And Pascal answered, "Why, the Jews, Your Majesty, the Jews." And Mark Twain, in a famous quote, says, "The Egyptian, the Babylonian, and the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, and then faded to dream stuff and passed away. The Greek and Roman followed, made a vast noise, and they are gone. Other peoples have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now or have vanished. The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert and aggressive mind. All things are mortal, but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality?" Perhaps that's what Jethro was wondering too. And lastly, I wanted to quote Tolstoy. "The Jew is the emblem of eternity. He who neither slaughter nor torture of thousands of years could destroy, he who neither fire nor sword nor inquisition was able to wipe off the face of the earth, he who was the first to produce the oracles of God, he who has been for so long the guardian of prophecy and has transmitted it to the rest of the world. Such a nation cannot be destroyed. The Jew is as everlasting as eternity itself. I could go on and on with the different quotes that point to the supernatural existence of who we are. But I really believe that this is what the rabbis are saying. There are three things which really point to something about us, which really identifies our relationship with God, which really identifies who we are as a people. Number one, anti-Semitism. It just doesn't make any sense. Number two, the Torah that we have, the book of wisdom that we have. No one has a book of wisdom as wise as ours. And the thirdly, Rabbi Eliezer says that it was the splitting of the sea. Well, what he means by that is the miraculous existence of the Jewish people, the fact that no matter what has happened, we've still been around. The Jewish people, when running away from Pharaoh in Egypt, had reached the Red Sea, and there was nowhere to turn. There was nowhere for them to go, and they themselves were terrified. They thought, there's no way we can get out of this one. God's helped us with the 10 plagues, but surely here God himself is stuck. And obviously that's never the case, and the sea split, and they were able to come through the sea on dry land and escape from the clutches of Pharaoh. And what the splitting of the Red Sea really, the splitting of the sea really indicates is the miraculous existence of who we are as a people. I'd like to just end with talking about Jethro just a few more minutes, and then let you enjoy your lunch in peace. We have another Talmud that says that Pharaoh had 3 advisors. When Pharaoh was wondering about what to do with the Jewish people, he called in his 3 advisors. What can I do about the Jewish problem? Balaam, who we're familiar with, says to Pharaoh, you've got to wipe them out. Balaam basically suggested to Pharaoh the final solution, and the fact that Pharaoh then went and killed all the baby boys was as a direct consequence of Balaam's advice. The second of his advisors was Eov, or Job. And Job, we're told, remained silent. Job was indifferent. He didn't say anything. He didn't argue with Pharaoh, and he didn't agree with Balaam. He just kept stum, as we say in Yiddish. And the third one, Jethro, well, Jethro defected. Jethro protested and knew that if he protested, he probably would lose his life. Pharaoh is a dictator. He doesn't believe in people disagreeing with him. And then Jethro ran away. And the Talmud proceeds to tell us that because of what Balaam did, because of the evil suggestion that he gave to Pharaoh, Balaam ended up being killed later on in the book of Bamidbar. Because of what Job did, because of Job's indifference, because Job didn't take a stand for truth and for justice, well, Job went through very painful experiences as a sort of, as Rav Soloveitchik says, as a punishment to him for not taking other people's pain seriously. And God was, so to speak, saying to Job, if you can't relate and identify with other people when they are suffering, then let me give you a taste of what suffering is so that you can better learn to do that. And Job lived a life of incredible pain and suffering. And the third one was Jethro. The third one was Jethro, the third advisor, who told Pharaoh to let the Jewish people, who basically said, Pharaoh, you can't do this, it's ridiculous, and he had to run away. Well, Jethro was rewarded with the fact that his descendants became incredibly great rabbis. They sat in the Jewish Supreme Court in the Sanhedrin, and as a result of the choices that he made, his grandchildren benefited and his descendants benefited from the choice that he made. I think what we see from Jethro, number one, from the fact that he left his whole world and came to join the Jewish people as a result of these 3 things that he saw. And the fact that Jethro was able to fight against Pharaoh himself, fight against pretty much the Adolf Hitler of the time, and say, you can't do this, it's genocide, it's terrible, it's wrong. We see how much independence Jethro had. We see how much thinking for himself he had. We see how he didn't take what the world took as an absolute, what the world saw as an absolute truth, but he was willing to listen. The very first word of this week's portion is Vayishma, Yitro, and Jethro listened. I think listening was the secret behind Jethro's successes. Listening was the secret behind how Jethro became who he became. He listened with an open mind. He listened to information with a neutrality, and he made his own choices, and they were formulated by his own opinions, and other people's opinions didn't dictate how he thought. Of course, he would have had humility to listen to what other people said and take their advice and take their words seriously. But at the end of the day, he recognized that he was gifted with a brain, he was gifted with his own way of seeing the world, and he was going to go with his convictions all the way, even if it meant potentially losing his life with Pharaoh, and even if it meant leaving behind everything that he had in Midian to come and join the Jewish people. This is the message that is very relevant for every single one of us today, not to just go with status quo, not to just go with what everyone else is saying, but to really, truly stick to our own convictions, to see what makes sense to us and act accordingly. Once again, thank you so much for listening, taking the time to join me for this Lunch and Learn, and wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.